Dr. Chris Kopff, University of Colorado in Boulder.
It's time for the Newsmaker Show on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA. Here's Kevin Torres.
How about that, Chris Kopff? Don't you think they ought to color states so when you're flying over them, you can say, oh, there it is, blue. That must be Colorado.
I definitely think so, especially when you're called Colorado, which I think means the colored state. We have a truth in advertising issue.
Yes, that's right. Listen, I want to tell you something that the president spoke last night, but we're going to leave it to Dr. Heinemann tomorrow to dissect that speech and tick off all the Democrats and the low-information voters, as they say. You know, when you watch O'Reilly, do you ever watch O'Reilly? I make it a point.
On occasion.
I make it a point not to. But when Waters is on, the guy that goes out and asks questions of people,
right,
then I watch it. At least I watch that portion of it. And how totally uninformed people are. And, you know, at first I thought it was a fix. They went out and just found the really dumb people. I shouldn't judge them like that, but yeah, they're uninformed anyway. But no, apparently they'll say, get the first 20 people you see.
Yeah.
And they don't know anything. I mean, they don't have a clue. But
last week he went around and asked women, and they couldn't identify Hillary Clinton.
Or Nancy Pelosi, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Nancy Pelosi, God bless them. But, you know, I mean, to not be able to identify the next president of the United States.
I know it, yeah.
And the argument
but they're going to vote for her.
Because all the women will vote for her.
They're going to vote for her.
The women don't know who she is, for crying out loud. No, well, Kim Kardashian might win, but not Hillary.
Well, here's something interesting that, you know, as a former New Yorker, Zephyr Teachout, how do you like that for a name? Zephyr Teachout, who is considered to be more liberal than Cuomo. She's a little bit to the left of Cuomo, and Zephyr carried Albany County. The people who know him best.
The people who know him best, yes. To know him is to love him not.
Well, listen, I want to talk not about the presidential speech last night, and we're going to leave that to Heinemann. He'll have a whole day to get that all fouled up. Yeah. Now, you live in Colorado, which has legalized pot. And I'll tell you kind of a personal story. A member of my family living in Phoenix was talking to a lady recently, and she said, my son was on Letterman. Oh, says my relative. What was he doing on the Letterman show? Well, he led the battle to have pot legalized in Colorado. And my relative prudently didn't say anything, but she thought, well, you must be very proud.
How proud you must be.
Yeah.
Yes, to legalize recreational marijuana.
Yes. Well, how's that working out there in Colorado?
We had legalized medical marijuana some years ago, and that is a downward path.
Well, it always follows after that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here is what there have been a number of problems about kids getting hold of it more easily, about the products made with it, like brownies, not being regulated. So you don't know how much you're getting. They say, well, that'll be solved. But the good news is the government will get a lot of money from taxing this, which was formerly not taxed because it was illegal. You don't tax illegal things. And we heard this, the first month there were $2 million, and we had built into our budget getting $30 million by the end of the fiscal year. Fiscal year goes July to July, and that would mean $60 million for the calendar year, and the first $40 million would go to build schools, you see. So
they're always going to help the kids, right?
When you did this. Well, the first month it was $2 million, and they projected $3.5 million, and we hear, you read Forbes magazine, they took a little time from praising illegal immigration to praise drug use. And now the fiscal year has ended, and it's August, and the Democrats who control both houses of the Colorado legislature met to decide how to divide up the money. And the problem is, you and I could probably figure this out, but if they're making $2 million a month and 6 months have gone by, that doesn't equal $30 million, which is what they were expecting. That equals $12 million.
That's the way I would have done it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting there. The Democrats, because this was actually covered in the local news, TV shows and things like that. They're sitting there going, "How are we going to? The first $40 million has to go for schools," and we're going, "We only have $12 million." I mean, some of these schools are planned. They were actually in the budget to be built with the $40 million, which would be 2/3 of the $60 million.
Yeah.
And the problem is there's a 1/3 issue, and the 1/3 is we've made 1/3 in the first half of the year. This is not a tax bonanza. The one argument they had for it was we'd have all these wonderful schools because the kids would be smoking pot, wouldn't be able to learn very much, but that wouldn't be legal. They wouldn't be legally doing that. Now it turns out there isn't a tax bonanza. People continue there are more medical marijuana applications than before because it's cheaper. There are still people on the street selling it. Some of whom just simply have medical marijuana cards and use them to buy and sell at a discount. But even the people from Mexico are still supplying their customers because they can sell it really cheap.
Yeah.
They have transportation costs, but they don't have any tax costs whatsoever. And so this $30 million bonanza we're supposed to be looking at turns into a $12 million, which is not enough to pay for any of the plans. I mean, if we knew it was going to be so little, we could have planned something appropriate. This thing does not raise money. It does cause an increased use of drugs. It does make it easier for kids to get hold of drugs, and that both college and
high school, high school kids now.
It has all the negative effects that were predicted, but it doesn't have the positive effects that were predicted.
Who pushed legalizing marijuana in Colorado?
It was a big Democratic Party thing, but the Libertarians also were very big on this. Libertarians, when they're not, I mean, I don't want to get into it sounds like it's personal details, but this drug thing is a cause with libertarians. It's not one of these things where, one more thing the government shouldn't do. No, they insist it's a wonderful thing, and people are happier because of it, and it calms them down, and of course, not to mention all the people with glaucoma. We've discussed this. Which, that supposedly are suffering. The fact is there are a small percentage of older people who are having problems with arthritis, who are having problems with glaucoma, and special provision could be made for them. But that isn't the point. A doctor would have a prescription, you'd fill it in a pharmacy. No, the whole point was to set up these stores for medical marijuana that are now selling recreational marijuana. But the fact is, the medical marijuana business is bigger than ever in Colorado, and doctors just sign off on this stuff. Doctor, I have an ache. Well, here's your medical marijuana card. So all these young people are walking around with medical marijuana cards, buying this stuff. It's just all the negative effects we predicted have turned out, but the positive ones was we're going to have a lot of money for building schools. No, we don't. We do not have that money because it turns out people who use drugs also don't pay taxes.
Well, as you well know, and everyone except the people on O'Reilly's Waters World, is that what it's called, Waters World?
Waters World,
yeah.
Yes. Waters
Everyone, those no information voters, never mind low information, they don't know anything. All right, now everyone else knows that political parties are made up of coalitions. The most famous one, in some ways infamous, was the one FDR put together of Southern segregationists and Northern liberals. But he made it work, right?
He made it work. He was brilliant.
Yeah, he was very good at that. Yeah.
They were also the big city machines.
Yeah.
Remember,
Oh, yeah.
most of the
Yeah.
big cities
Yeah.
were run by political machines.
That's right.
And so it was a brilliant scheme because liberals didn't like machines, and Northerners don't like Southerners in this country in those days. But he got everybody to work together. But whatever his faults, he was a brilliant politician.
Almost every Democrat running for office is going to push legalized marijuana if they can get it on the ballot. If they can get it on the ballot, people can go vote. The young people will vote for it, and they'll probably vote Democrat at the same time. I have to take a break with Chris Kopff. We'll be back to talk about Estonia. Estonia, you know where that is, folks? Estonia. That could get us into World War III. We got to be careful that nobody ticks off Estonia. Okay, we'll be back in just a minute. We have Chris Kopff with us today. He's promoting... no, he's not promoting marijuana. We've got a lot of people in New York promoting it now. And Norm Makumsky, a former teacher in Hornell High School, I'm just putting this on now, and some others are saying, be careful. Medical marijuana is the gateway to legalize marijuana. And a guy named John Woo, a professor at some university in New York, he ran for lieutenant governor. He didn't make it either, but, well, we'll talk about that with Heinemann tomorrow. Heinemann was promoting Woo just to screw up the Democrats. Not very nice guy, Heinemann. He's stuck in the Republican, you know what I mean? These guys get stuck in the party. They lose the big picture. All right, let's talk about Estonia. Tell the people why we should worry about the 2 million people. I think that's what it is, 2 million in Estonia, huh?
So listen here, a speech that wasn't on in prime time was a speech given by President Obama in Tallinn, Estonia last week. And he went to them. They are now part of our NATO group. I think the Baltic states were added by Bush. The older Central European countries were added by Clinton. And he said to them, as clear as day, I say to the people of Estonia, people of the Baltics, we are bound by treaty alliance. Article 5 of NATO is crystal clear. An attack on one is an attack on all. So if you ever ask again who will come to help when Russia attacks you, you know the answer. The NATO alliance, including the armed forces of the United States of America, end quotes. The president has promised Estonia that if Mr. Putin bullies them, the United States will go to war for them. That's a clear statement. By the way, it's also, he's quite right, it's what is promised by the NATO treaty.
Yeah, but I'll bet you that not many NATO nations will join in the defense of Estonia.
Who is going to fight for Estonia? The problem is it was precisely a small country in Europe, Serbia, that provoked the event that caused World War I.
God help us, yes.
First, it was these. It wasn't even the Serbian people. It was a few radicals in Serbia who assassinated the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and then the Austro-Hungarian Empire insisted on certain provisions, and then Russia came in to protect Serbia, and then Germany had alliances with the Austro-Hungarian, and then England and France had treaties with Russia. And suddenly we have one of the most disastrous wars in the history of the human race.
Which led to World War II, yeah.
Exactly the same situation with Estonia.
Well, I don't care what he says. I just have this very strong feeling that if Putin goes after Estonia, and maybe that would stop him from doing it, who knows? But if he goes after Estonia, I don't think too many NATO nations are going to be sending their sons and now daughters out to fight for Estonia. Well, first of all, he'd have it all under control in about a day and a half, so it'd be kind of too late, you know.
Yes, of course, he could march, as you say, a day and a half if they were taking their time.
Yes, if they were taking marijuana breaks, right. Now, our good friend Bob Heinemann, who is a smart guy. I mean, Bob and I go at it all the time, but he's a dear friend and a real friend, and he can't help it if he's bogged down in Republican politics, right? I mean, it's the way the guy is. But Bob points out that the Russian army ain't much. It just isn't a great army. Now, what have you studied that at all?
Well, I haven't studied it very much. The Russian army, I mean, it depends on the context. Could we beat the Russians in a armed fight? Yes, we are far superior to the Russians. But can the Russians beat the Ukrainians or the Estonians?
Yes.
Yes, of course they could. Yeah. Furthermore, Russia has nuclear arms. Yeah. And that's one of the problems. Our people are quite correctly bothered by the idea that Iran might get nuclear weapons. Well, guess what, friends? Russia has nuclear weapons. And this is the problem. How would we liberate Estonia anyhow? Bombing? We'd spend most of it bombing the people we're trying to liberate.
Well, that wouldn't be the first time they've done that, right?
Warfare.
What's that?
If we did provoke Russia, there could be nuclear warfare.
Oh, yeah.
Under the old Cold War, it never happened because we both understood there was mutual assured destruction, as it was called, the MAD doctrine. But, at a certain stage, people have had enough.
Well,
Making these kinds of very dangerous promises that probably, I agree with you, he has no intention of keeping.
No.
That's the good thing about our president.
no.
He says these things, but he doesn't mean them. But does Putin know he doesn't mean them?
But we know that his poll numbers are going to jump up now following that speech last night. That's the way of it. And if he does some serious bombing on ISIS, that'll help him too for a while. Now you've got a guy named Udall who made a real blunder. A serious blunder. And listen, I'm very sympathetic to that. You go out and give speeches all day long. You're going to say the wrong thing. Eventually, you're going to do it. But he really said a stupid thing. Tell him what he said. Then we got to wrap it up.
This was in the debate against his opponent, Cory Gardner, the Republican there. So he should have been prepared for him. And he told the people of Colorado that the two journalists who were beheaded are pleading with them to not rush into a war and not rush into bombing. And you're going, how could you know that?
Yeah.
And two, what sense does it make to remind people of the thing that really have us upset? What we're upset about is these people are beheading our citizens and daring us to do something about it. And he tells us that the beheaded people are pleading with us not to do anything. And people were just outraged at the insensitivity of the whole thing, to use these people's tragic death to score a cheap political point.
Now, if anyone's paying attention in Colorado, and they probably aren't, like most places, they don't pay attention. Could that cost him the election?
It's a very close election. They are all the polls but one. There's one poll that has him ahead, but most of the polls have them within 2 or 3 points.
Okay, Chris, our time is gone.
The election is the brief answer.
Our time. What was the brief answer? I interrupted.
Brief answer is yes, because it's a very close election.
Okay, our time is gone. Chris Kopff, look forward to having you next week because it's always fun, always interesting, and we always learn something. Bob Heineman tomorrow on the Newsmaker Show. Okay.